On to today's topic, and that is FC Sochaux-Montbéliard, better known as Sochaux. Sochaux are a team who play in Ligue 2, in the French second tier. The background to this club is, they were founded by Jean-Pierre Peugeot of the car. They won 2 Ligue 1 titles, but a very long time ago. But they recently won in terms of their major honours, recently won the Coupe de France, most recently in 2007, but last played in Liga in 2014. But they're a club who are renowned as, having one of France's best and most prolific academies. Hence why we're discussing Sochaux on the Scouted Football podcast. But they're not only having sort of a few interesting under 23 players at present that we're going to get onto at some point. It's the fruits of that academy which has been quite interesting to us at Scouted, as well as the scouting that Sochaux, have done themselves to bring in players from the Ile-de-France region to Sochaux to then, blood them into the first team and play them up through the under-19s and then into the first team and then to be farmed out elsewhere. Alex, you've got a bit of an affinity with Sochaux. I remember you, or I recall you saying so on the Tifo podcast not so long ago. How did that come about? What's your origin story of the Sochaux love?
It's Football Manager. It's not so. So I've always liked teams of this ilk, which I guess is unsurprising given that I like Scouted football and I do a video series called Sensible Transfers. The idea of clubs with an emphasis on the academy, with an emphasis on youth development, astute acquisitions. That's just my thing. And Sochaux, this is going back to sort of 2000, 2001. Sochaux have had a great academy since they set it up in the 70s. So this is not a new thing, but that particular generation had people like Benoit Pedretti, Kamal Meriem, Pierre-Alain Frau coming through. And I decided that I would play them on Football Manager. And it was great. Very, very kind of classic, orthodox 4-4-2. Did quite well in the first season, then went and bought all of the decent Nantes players because they were really strong at that point as well. And just had a kind of fairly sustained period of success. But I think the thing with that sort of, I don't know, it's one of the reasons that I find French football interesting is that you can see it's not just that the academies are good and that obviously the scouting is good. It's that these clubs are not afraid to put these players into first team positions. That there's a realization that unlike some clubs, and I would say Manchester City maybe are an example of this, where you buy up good young players, but then you just farm them out and they're sitting on your books, but they're on loan somewhere else. Because of the financial necessities of being particularly a Ligue 2 side, but also a Ligue 1 side, sometimes these players get minutes. They're out there and they're showing what they can do. And from a developmental perspective, there is not going to be anything more helpful than getting first team minutes in a competitive league, particularly if you're in that sort of up to 21, 22 age bracket. And so I think you see not just a skill in finding and producing players when they're in those early stages, sort of 14 to 16 phase, but you can then see the trajectory of that player as they start getting first team minutes and then as they move on often to a much bigger club. And Sochaux seem to have had that pretty nailed down for a while now.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get onto the sort of the list of alumni that Sochaux can boast. But currently, in the present day, they finished 7th in Ligue 2 this season, which I suppose is not a bad finish. They've kind of middled around mid-table for quite a few seasons since their relegation from Ligue 1. And they're owned by a Chinese real estate group, Nanking, who have sort of fingers in other pies, sort of in basketball and esports. But their manager is Omar Daf, who was a part of the Senegal squad in the 2002 World Cup in Korea, Japan. And obviously, famously, that Senegal team that beat France, and a lot of those players who were playing in the Senegalese team were playing French football. I can't say that I know very much about Omar Daf, apart from that he's the current manager of Sochaux, and seems to be doing quite well with the young players there. I mean, what's your experience of Omar Daf?
Omar Daf was the centre back in that Football Manager side.
Oh, right, okay.
So one of the things that's really interesting about Sochaux is Daf played for them like almost 200 times. They have a really strong tradition of bringing back people who have been involved with the club as a player to work in the club hierarchy. So Eric Hele, who was basically the academy manager from a footballing perspective rather than a sporting director kind of perspective, he started his professional career at Sochaux. You've got people like Bernard Gengini, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, who was he a French? Yeah, no, he's a French international. And he was a sporting director at Sochaux for quite a long time. Again, started his career there, made over 200 appearances. So I think, and this is going back to the mid-70s, by the way, when Sochaux set their academy up and had people like Joel Batts coming through it. They clearly understand the importance of bringing in people at a managerial or sporting director level who have an association with the club since that kind of mid-70s period when the academy was founded and started to be really important. Because they know that if a player's come through that system, they understand why Sochaux need to do stuff the way they do. And I think that's a really, really good indicator of an overarching philosophy that has, I don't want to say survived, because that's a bit apocalyptic, but that has continued despite changes in ownership. I think that's a reasonable way of putting it. I've watched a bit of Sochaux on and off. I mean, Ligue 2 is not the easiest league to get hold of to watch in England, but they seem okay. I mean, it's a bit messy sometimes, the way they play. They're quite a transition-based team. They do press energetically at the front, and one of the players that we're going to talk about later is definitely useful for that. You can see that they're a team that are not necessarily massively confident in the style of football that they're playing currently. And they do get exposed at the back quite a bit. Transitions, they're not amazingly good at defending transitions. And also they need more quality in that squad. I mean, if you look at all of the sort of attacking and creative metrics in Ligue 2, then there aren't really Sochaux players that are sticking out as being towards the top of that league in expected goals, expected assists, progressive passes, that kind of stuff. It's dominated by the bigger teams in that league that you would expect. But he's doing all right. But I think more importantly, he gets it. He gets the Sochaux mentality. He understands that there is not a pressure, but there is a rationale and a justification for giving minutes to young players, to bringing them through, to kind of embracing the importance of the academy to how Sochaux construct their first team. And I think if you bring a player back who has had that experience or has been around that experience and benefited from it, I think you're much more likely to see it successful.
Yeah, sort of as a way of understanding the culture of the club that has lived out throughout the ages.
Completely, yeah, absolutely.
You're more likely to get somebody who isn't going to come in and perhaps with some things even well-intentioned different ideas, but those which may be at odds with the philosophy of the club, or the philosophy of perhaps giving minutes to young players. And we have seen that this season. I mean, the likes of Alan Virginius, who's a 2003 born winger, can play on either side. He's been given, I think, 15 or 16 games, but predominantly off the bench. And has. I mean, it was interesting that you said that they're very much a team who play in transition, because that is especially with young players sometimes who've got a skill set like Virginius's. They do look a lot better at the sort of the genesis of their professional career if they're playing in a team which complements their natural ability. And we'll get on to him, but I mean, just touching on what you said about their academy and how it's been, one of the best since its establishment in the 1970s. They've typically done quite well in the Coupe Gambardella, which is an under-19 tournament. So this is, obviously before you're even getting to the first team level. They've won that 3 times. They've been runners-up twice. So in terms of, while they don't have the riches that other French clubs may have and the ability to pump money into the youth system, they still do all right. And I think that's one of the most important things, is that throughout, as you said, throughout the lifespan of this club, they constantly have had a steady stream. And I think that, while 7th is fine, the football can maybe be a bit messy, as you say. I think you can say that, as a manager, it's at Sochaux perhaps not always a results business, because he's been essentially the latest custodian for the culture of the club.
I think that's a really nice way of putting it, because I think if you're looking at French football, has definitely had a strong tradition of emphasis on youth development. And, this is something going back to the establishment of Clairefontaine, and, this really clear sense that if you invest in younger players and a kind of a holistic approach to developing them as well. And it's, we've seen places like Germany kind of catch up with this slowly, but France really set the pace with it. Gerard Houllier particularly was very important in that. And you're therefore in an environment where lots of French clubs are trying to do the same thing. And of course, some of the best academies are obviously going to be places like Lyon, PSG, clubs with lots and lots of money, because they can put lots of money into their academy as well as into their first team and into their training facilities and so on. So if you're a Sochaux that is never, ever going to compete financially with clubs of that ilk, then having somebody who has the strength of character and the understanding of culture to be able to say, no, the way that we're going to progress as a club, and actually, let's be brutally honest, possibly even survive as a club, is to focus on that culture. That dropping even 10 million euro on 3 or 4 players in an effort to try and buy promotion from Ligue 2 is very, very unlikely to happen. What's much more likely is that there will be 2 or 3 players in a youth crop that are sufficiently talented to propel Sochaux up the table at a certain point. But if they can basically tread water in Ligue 2, they keep producing some players that are good enough to sell on, and keep their revenues up that way, then at some juncture, then they will have a chance of getting back into Ligue 1, and that's where the financial stuff maybe starts to come back to them. But it's about resisting the kind of boom and bust urge to, we were, I think they were the 3rd longest running Ligue 1 club or something. They like a really storied club in those terms, and if you're an owner of a club like that, then maybe the temptation is to, this is our rightful place in Ligue 1, and we're going to spend in order to get there. And that just would not work. That wouldn't work from a club culture perspective. I don't think the fans would appreciate it. And I also don't think that it's a sustainable model, particularly in France, where there's obviously so much financial instability at the moment. So what they're doing is by far and away the most sensible thing. And having managers that get that, and like you say, act as a custodian of that, that's the correct appointment, even if the football's not always amazing.